We ended off on SABC 2. We had just started on the conversation with ICASA, the Independent Communications Authority of South Africa, seeking to review the code on people with disability to make sure that the entire South African public, in particular the disability sector, become aware of this process and become part of regulation processes. The aim of the process is to promote awareness in both urban and rural areas, especially those who lack access to information, to be able to consume information through different mediums, being radio and television. Well, joining us now and who has stayed with us in studio to talk about the process is ICASA councillor Katharina Pillay. Thanks for staying. We really do appreciate your time.
Thanks for having us.
Let's now go into a little bit more detail and actually ask, what does the code on people with disability entail?
It sets the minimum parameters for access in terms of telecoms. So that would be fixed or mobile services, and it does the same for broadcasting. In the telecoms environment, well, we had an old code for people with disabilities that was promulgated in, I think, about 2008. And this current draft is a revision and an update of the old regulation. The old regulation really looked at providing services. If you look at your old handsets, you'd remember that there's a raised bar on the 5, as an example.
Yes, yes.
And that was to help a blind person navigate the keypad.
Yeah.
That's a little bit more different in an environment of smartphones.
Yeah, now it's touchscreen. So
yes.
how do you navigate around this? I wouldn't even know.
That's one of the reasons that we're looking at universal design. What universal design does is it talks about providing services where you are providing it on a general basis as opposed to specifically for people with disabilities. The logic is if you include something as a standard, it's much cheaper to do and makes it much more easily accessible than if you have to include it at a later stage. A simple example about that is historically when it came to people with disabilities, say for example you were blind or you were deaf, you needed a particular type of handset, particularly if you were blind or hard of sight.
Yeah.
And the problem that you had was it was much more difficult to access it. Turnaround times were more difficult. You had to pay more. Same thing if you were deaf. To get a particular handset that was coupled or compatible for hearing aids, or you needed a particular headset, which was also difficult. So when we talk about universal design, you look at it from the perspective that if you think about your iPhone or any smartphone,
yeah.
Many of those applications or services or features are things that everybody wants. A simple example is everyone wants to be able to speak without on a hands-free basis. It makes usage much simpler. But if it's included as a standard feature, of course it becomes much simpler and much more easily accessible.
Yeah, yeah.
Then when it comes to texting, you want to be able to navigate in a way that's simple. A simple thing is, when it comes to the keys on the keypad, they can't be too close. With some of the oldest smartphones, you found that there's a particular one that I don't want to mention, but you'd essentially have all the keys that touched each other, and you'd know from the messages that you get from people, you'd find that there's a particular phone or device that used to have the most errors because all the buttons touched.
They touched each other, so it made it difficult.
Yes, simple things like that. And the principle really is create the phone available for everyone, not just people with disabilities.
Yeah.
And it's really about mainstreaming people with disabilities.
Okay.
And changing the mindset from something that you look at and you pity to being normal, active members of society. Yeah. In addition to that, that's one of the key elements of the revision to the regulation. And then you look at it in the broadcasting context, for example. In the broadcasting context, we look at sign language.
Yeah.
We look at subtitles. The audio explanation that you have, where you'd see it on some of the local soaps. So really, that's what you're looking at, to make services more accessible.
And to have that as as a standard for every single broadcast show that goes on air?
That is what this process seeks to do.
How realistic would it be for, say, a program like Morning Live, for instance? I mean, would you be able to do that? Sort of have the subtitles at the bottom? I suppose having a sign language interpreter, that could be simple
You
enough.
see, that's the thing. In other jurisdictions, they don't necessarily do all of it. So as a result of this consultative process, we would be able to make a determination on whether we impose a particular route or whether we leave it up to the broadcaster, as long as you do something to make the service accessible.
Accessible to more people.
Yes.
In terms of your partnership with the SABC, what is the mandate, should I say, of the public broadcaster with regard to this?
It's really about the public service role of the SABC and assisting ICASA in terms of promoting consumer protection regulations, this being one of them, to make sure that people know what the regulation is about. They know that there's an amendment. They understand what the platforms are for them to comment. The problem is, it doesn't matter how good your regulations are. If people don't know what that regulation is, they can never exercise their right.
Yeah.
So as a result of that, it's really about promoting the awareness.
All right, and there's that roadshow, which we have spoken about, but if you want more information, please visit the website, www.icasa.org.za. I think it's a fantastic initiative to make television, radio, and mobile devices more accessible, and a standard more accessible to people with disabilities. So, Katharina Pillay, thank you. Good luck with going forward on this. Katharina is a councillor with ICASA. All right.